It was a quiet morning in Montecito. The sun peeked through the California mist, casting its golden light on a sprawling estate nestled among the hills. Inside, Prince Harry sipped his tea while Meghan Markle scrolled through her phone. Their two children, Archie and Lilibet, played in the next room, their laughter momentarily breaking the tension that hung in the air like a storm about to erupt. Moments later, Meghan's face changed. Her eyes narrowed, lips parted, and her fingers stopped mid-scroll. She stared at the screen in disbelief. A headline flashed across the top of her phone, one that would reignite the firestorm of royal controversy once again. King Charles makes surprising decision about Harry and Meghan's royal titles. For a couple who had long walked away from the duties of the British monarchy, Harry and Meghan had never truly escaped its grip. The titles, the scrutiny, the expectations, and the headlines had followed them across continents. And now, once again, the royal spotlight had turned their way, threatening to unravel the carefully curated life they had built on the shores of California. It wasn't just another tabloid blurb or gossipy segment on a British morning show. This was different. This was serious. Sources close to Buckingham Palace claimed King Charles had made a quiet but calculated decision, one that would keep the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's titles intact during his reign. But the future, it seemed, was far from stable. Because looming just behind the king was his heir, Prince William, who reportedly had other plans. And if whispers from the palace were to be believed, those plans had already been set in motion. To understand how it all came to this, we must rewind the clock back to a time before the drama, before the Netflix deals and the Oprah interviews. Back to the moment when Harry and Meghan first walked down the aisle in a fairy tale ceremony that captivated the world. It was supposed to be a new era for the royal family, modern, inclusive, and unshackled from the rigidity of the past. But that hope, like so many royal dreams, would soon give way to bitter fallout. For years, Harry had been a beloved figure, the cheeky, rebellious younger prince who walked behind his mother's coffin, who served in Afghanistan, who brought laughter and authenticity to the royal brand. When Meghan entered the picture, she was seen as a breath of fresh air, an American actress with charisma, intellect, and grace. But behind the scenes, tensions brewed. Cultural clashes, tabloid frenzy, and reported family rifts turned their love story into a lightning rod of controversy. By 2020, the couple had had enough. They announced their decision to step back from royal duties, a move that shook the monarchy to its core. The British press labeled it Megxit, a clever but dismissive moniker for what Harry later described as a desperate bid for freedom. They wanted independence, privacy, and a chance to raise their children away from the harsh spotlight. But as they left the palace behind, they carried with them the most enduring symbols of royalty, their titles. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex. It was a title bestowed by the late Queen Elizabeth II, a gift of royal recognition on the day of their wedding. A mark of honor. A bridge between two worlds. But for many within the royal establishment, it was a bridge that should have been burned the moment Harry and Meghan walked away. The debate has raged ever since. Should the couple keep their titles despite stepping away from royal duties? Should they be allowed to speak on politics, sign multi-million-dollar media deals, and criticize the institution while still holding royal names? It's a question that has divided royal watchers, political analysts, and even the British public. King Charles, known for his desire to modernize the monarchy and avoid unnecessary conflict, had reportedly taken a cautious approach. Removing royal titles is no small matter. It requires not just political will but also legislative action, a formal act of parliament. Such a move would be unprecedented in modern royal history and could unleash a constitutional storm. For Charles, who ascended the throne amid global change and personal grief, the optics mattered. He had inherited a fractured monarchy. The death of Queen Elizabeth had left a void not just in leadership but in national identity. Any move he made would be scrutinized under a microscope. According to palace insiders, Charles has chosen to let sleeping dogs lie for now. He's granted Harry and Meghan the space to build their lives in America, refrained from public criticism, and retained their titles as a gesture of restraint. But restraint doesn't last forever, and it doesn't always extend to the next generation. The same insiders revealed something more startling. King Charles has quietly given his son William the green light to act differently. When William eventually becomes king, the decision over Harry and Meghan's titles will no longer be a matter of polite conversation or private debate. It will become an act of royal policy. And according to whispers from court, William has already made up his mind. The future king reportedly believes that the Sussex titles must be revoked. That keeping them is not only a betrayal of royal duty but a dangerous precedent. He is said to be resolute, confident, and unafraid of the backlash. For William, it's about preserving the institution, protecting the monarchy from erosion, drawing a clear line between duty and celebrity. Behind closed doors, preparations have allegedly begun. Secret meetings with constitutional advisors, briefings with parliament allies, discussions about precedent, legality, and public sentiment. The wheels, according to reports, are already in motion. And yet, King Charles remains hesitant. Not because he agrees with everything Harry and Meghan have done, but because he fears the blowback. He knows the world is watching. He understands the symbolism of titles. He is deeply aware that removing them could stir old wounds, ignite new controversies, and distract from the monarchy's already fragile image. There's also a personal element. Charles is still a father who lost his relationship with one son in the name of duty. For all the royal decorum and public silence, there is still pain beneath the surface. Pain that reminds him of the rift with his own brother. Pain that echoes through the long, troubled history of royal family conflict. But Charles also knows something else. Time is not on his side. At 76, his reign may not last decades. He's a transitional figure, a bridge between the old and the new. And William, whether the world is ready or not, will take the reins sooner than many expect. So now we arrive at the crossroads. A monarchy caught between two kings, one choosing diplomacy and delay, the other preparing for a clean break. The titles are safe for now, but the question isn't if they'll be stripped. It's when, and what that moment will mean not just for Harry and Meghan, but for the entire future of the royal institution. Will it be a final chapter in a royal feud, or the beginning of something far more explosive? One thing is certain, the story is far from over. It happened quietly. There was no royal press conference, no grand proclamation, no flurry of official documents. Just a ripple, subtle, almost imperceptible, moving through the high walls of Buckingham Palace before reaching the outside world. A decision had been made, a line drawn, carefully and deliberately, by the monarch himself. King Charles had chosen to let Prince Harry and Meghan Markle keep their royal titles. For now. But what made this quiet announcement so earth-shaking was what came next. The revelation that this decision, this moment of temporary clemency, would not last into the future. When Prince William ascends to the throne, the winds are expected to change. Drastically. For the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, this means the clock has started ticking. According to sources cited by Radar Online, King Charles is playing a strategic game. On one hand, he refuses to strip Harry and Meghan of their Duke and Duchess of Sussex titles during his reign. He knows the monarchy is under constant scrutiny by the public, the media, and the international community. Stripping his own son and daughter-in-law of their titles could be interpreted as harsh, vindictive, or even unroyal. Charles wants to appear composed, calculated, above scandal. But he also wants the monarchy to survive. The 76-year-old king reportedly passed the responsibility, some might say the burden, of final action to his eldest son and heir, Prince William. And from the whispers emerging behind palace walls, William is not inclined to show the same mercy. Insiders familiar with the matter have revealed that William has been authorized to act decisively when the crown passes to him. The intention? Remove the Sussex titles once and for all. Not out of spite, they say, but out of duty. Because for William, this isn't personal. It's constitutional. It's about structure, loyalty, and protecting the monarchy's relevance in an increasingly cynical world. The timing of this revelation is no accident. In a year defined by global unrest, institutional distrust, and the growing question of whether monarchies still belong in the modern world, the royal family has been walking a razor-thin line. Charles, having waited decades for the throne, understands this precarious balance more than anyone. He's aware of his role as a steward, not just of tradition, but of public sentiment. That's why, insiders say, he won't be the one to fire the shot. Not directly. He'll maintain the status quo, at least until it no longer falls on him to maintain it. The strategy is elegant in its subtlety. Let Harry and Meghan retain their titles now, while public opinion continues to evolve. Avoid backlash. Preserve his image as a father attempting reconciliation. Then, hand the baton to William, who can act under the pretense of generational change, modernization, and redefinition. But let's not be mistaken, this is no empty rumor whispered in back rooms. The decision comes backed by private deliberations, legal consultations, and reportedly even preliminary discussions with parliamentary contacts. Because removing a royal title is not as simple as revoking a job position or changing a nameplate. It is a legal and constitutional process, one that has only been executed a handful of times throughout British history. A royal title is more than just a name. It's a statement, a mark of nobility that grants prestige, protocol rights, and influence, both within the United Kingdom and internationally. For Harry and Meghan, those titles have been a double-edged sword, a source of legitimacy, but also of criticism, a link to a past they have seemingly rejected, yet cannot fully escape. When Harry and Meghan stepped down from their senior royal duties in 2020, the announcement shocked the world. They were seen as the glamorous faces of a modern monarchy, diverse, outspoken, philanthropic. But the internal strain was undeniable. Harry later described the media attacks on Meghan as relentless. Meghan, in turn, spoke of isolation, pain, and thoughts of self-harm while living inside the palace walls. Their departure wasn't simply a vacation from royal life. It was a rescue mission. Still, they held on to their titles. Even after Oprah. Even after Harry's memoir Spare. Even after the Netflix docuseries that painted the royal institution in an unflattering, often devastating light. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex were never formally stripped of those names. And with each passing controversy, public calls grew louder. Critics demanded accountability. Traditionalists argued that you cannot have one foot in and one foot out. Yet the palace remained silent, at least on the surface. Now, we are beginning to see the outlines of a long-brewing strategy. King Charles, as it turns out, was never blind to the damage. But he was also never reckless. He chose to hold his hand close. And in doing so, avoided pouring gasoline on an already blazing fire. But the fire never really went out. It just simmered. And as the embers glow hotter, the plan for the future has come into focus. According to the Radar Online source, the monarch is very concerned about his image and fears backlash from his subjects. That's why he'd never dare take away Harry's Sussex title, despite all the hurt he's caused. The word hurt lingers, not just hurt to the crown, but to the family. Harry's tell-alls and public appearances have painted his royal relatives in unflattering light, particularly his father and brother. Yet Charles has chosen the route of restraint. His hope, some say, is to preserve at least a trace of peace until the torch passes. But what happens next is already in motion. Behind the red velvet curtains and gold-lined doors of the royal estate, senior aides have reportedly held multiple meetings on the matter. Some refer to them as secret planning sessions. Others call them scenario simulations. Whatever the name, the objective is the same: prepare for the day when a new king has the authority and will to make the move. Behind the scenes, people are saying that the royals have quietly sanctioned the title removal if Harry and Meghan step out of line again, the insiders said. That phrase, step out of line again, is deliberately ambiguous. What counts as stepping out of line in a post-Megxit world? Is it a candid interview? A political statement? A business deal perceived to exploit royal connections? The palace isn't saying. And perhaps that's the point. The lack of clarity creates a kind of suspended tension. The knowledge that the titles remain, but with conditions. Sources add that any removal of titles would require parliamentary involvement, likely through an act similar to the Titles Deprivation Act of 1917. Back then, the law was used to strip German-affiliated royals of their British peerages during World War I. It was a controversial but ultimately effective maneuver to preserve national unity during a time of chaos. Could such an act be revived for Harry and Meghan? Whispers from Westminster suggest it's being discussed. Discreetly, of course, but discussed nonetheless. The palace, it seems, has already begun drafting contingency plans, legal frameworks, PR strategies, timelines, and the moment of execution could align with William's coronation. When King Charles does pass away, it's a certainty that William will pull the trigger and strip her and Harry of their HRH status, the source added. The words are heavy with finality. Pull the trigger. Not suggest. Not debate. But execute. This isn't just theoretical anymore. It's a question of when. So here we are, in a strange and uncertain moment. Harry and Meghan hold royal titles that are both secure and vulnerable, granted by a father hesitant to confront, threatened by a brother determined to redefine, protected for now, but dangling by a thread in the years to come. For some, it is a matter of justice. For others, it is a tragic family drama playing out in the world's most public theater. Regardless of where one stands, the facts are clear. King Charles has chosen to wait. Prince William will not. And for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, every public word, Every appearance, every decision made under the eyes of the world could determine the fate of the titles they may or may not carry into the future. The weight of a royal title isn't just ceremonial. It carries centuries of tradition, layers of meaning, and the burden of representing a family, an institution, and an empire once so vast it touched every corner of the globe. The titles held by Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, Duke and Duchess of Sussex, are more than ornamental prefixes. They are symbols, emblems of status. And in recent years, they've become lightning rods for controversy, questions, and quiet fury inside palace walls. The debate over their titles didn't start overnight. It has been brewing since the very beginning of their romance, smoldering quietly beneath the surface, fueled by suspicion, cultural clashes, and a monarchy struggling to modernize without losing its grip on tradition. When Prince Harry and Meghan Markle married on May 19, 2018, the world watched with hopeful eyes. It was a moment soaked in optimism. A mixed-race American actress marrying the beloved younger son of Princess Diana. A wedding infused with gospel music, black clergy, and bold symbolism. It was a break from the past, and for many, it marked a turning point, a monarchy that could adapt, welcome change, and embrace diversity. But beneath the surface, tension was already building. On the day of the wedding, Queen Elizabeth II bestowed the titles Duke and Duchess of Sussex upon the newlyweds, following royal custom. It was meant to be a gift, an honor, a show of faith and support. But titles, while symbolic, are not immune to public scrutiny, especially in the modern age of digital transparency, media sensationalism, and political correctness. From the start, critics questioned whether Meghan, an outsider with no aristocratic lineage and a Hollywood past, truly understood the weight of a royal title. Some tabloids, with thinly veiled prejudice, mocked her as an American interloper. Others painted her as a disruptor. Headlines swirled with every appearance, every gesture, every deviation from protocol. Stories of Meghan making Kate Middleton cry, of staff quitting, of whispered arguments in palace corridors, whether true or not, flooded the media cycle. Harry, for his part, became increasingly protective. The trauma of losing his mother, Princess Diana, in the face of relentless media pressure was never far from his mind. In Meghan, he saw not just a partner but someone vulnerable to the same fate. Someone the institution failed to protect. Someone who would pay the price for daring to be different. By January 2020, the couple made their fateful announcement. They would step back as senior working royals. They would split their time between the United Kingdom and North America. They would seek financial independence. The press dubbed it Megxit, as though Meghan alone had orchestrated the retreat. But this was no solo act. It was a joint decision, a calculated escape. And yet, they retained their titles. The choice to keep the Duke and Duchess of Sussex designations stirred immediate backlash. If they were no longer serving the monarchy, why should they benefit from its prestige? Why should they be allowed to use those titles for their growing list of commercial endeavors? Netflix, Spotify, book deals, speaking engagements. The palace, ever cautious, issued carefully worded statements. Harry and Meghan would not use their HRH, Her Royal Highness, styles moving forward, but they would retain the Sussex titles. In practical terms, they couldn't be addressed as HRH Harry or HRH Meghan, but they would still be the Duke and Duchess. A compromise, perhaps, but one that satisfied neither side. To their supporters, it was a fair resolution. The couple had earned their titles through royal lineage and marriage, and keeping them was a nod to their history and identity. To their detractors, it was hypocrisy. You can't have one foot in and one foot out, they argued. If Harry and Meghan were going to forge their path, they should do so without the royal branding. Over time, the title debate intensified. When Harry and Meghan began making public statements about racism, mental health, and institutional failures, it became harder for the palace to justify the continued association. The 2021 Oprah interview sent shockwaves around the world. Allegations of racism within the royal family, Meghan's mental health crisis, the suggestion that Archie was denied a prince title due to his mixed-race heritage. These revelations turned the title conversation into something far more explosive. How could two individuals who had so openly criticized the monarchy still represent it in name? That question grew even sharper with each new project. The Netflix docuseries offered an unprecedented inside look at their departure from royal life, pulling no punches in its critique. Harry's memoir, released in 2023, delivered more bombshells. He spoke of frostiness with William, indifference from Charles, and the cold machinery of palace life. And yet, the titles remained. Some insiders began suggesting that it wasn't just about principle, it was about business. Titles open doors. They command fees. A Duke of Sussex label on a speaker's list or a book cover isn't just decoration. It's leverage. It signals status. And in Hollywood, in publishing, in philanthropy, those optics matter. But the titles have also become a liability. In political circles, using royal titles while making statements on climate change, women's rights, or U.S. elections raised ethical concerns. Members of the British Parliament have repeatedly voiced discomfort over the situation. Several even called for legislative review. The idea of a former working royal using titles while operating outside palace oversight became untenable for many. That's where the legal question enters the picture. Royal titles are not governed by whim. They are embedded within a constitutional framework. Removing a title like Duke of Sussex requires legal process, often through an Act of Parliament. The Titles Deprivation Act of 1917, originally used to strip German-affiliated royals of their British peerages during World War I, remains a possible, albeit rarely used, mechanism. Applying it to Harry and Meghan would set a powerful modern precedent. Over the years, several scenarios have been quietly discussed in legal and political circles. Could the palace pressure Parliament to act? Would public support be needed? What would be the political risk of stripping titles from a popular couple abroad, especially given their continued global influence? No clear answers emerged. What has become clear, however, is that the discussion is no longer academic. The royal family, according to insiders, has reached a consensus. While King Charles remains cautious, the broader sentiment within the firm has shifted. The patience is wearing thin. The Sussexes are seen as unpredictable, uncontrollable, and at times, damaging. This is not a universally held view. Some younger royals reportedly support Harry and Meghan's right to live freely. Others admire their commitment to causes that go beyond royal tradition. But those voices are quiet. The louder ones, the influential ones, are calling for a line in the sand. Even Harry seemed aware of the storm brewing. In his 2023 interview with Anderson Cooper, he was asked directly whether he would consider relinquishing the Sussex title. Harry didn't answer with certainty. He deflected, speaking instead about his love for his family, his hope for reconciliation, and his wish to contribute in his own way. But the question lingered. The fact that it needed to be asked spoke volumes. Meghan, too, has hinted at a complicated relationship with her title. In interviews and articles, she has described feeling constrained by royal life. She has spoken of being silenced, of having to play a role that didn't fit. And yet, the Duchess of Sussex title remains prominently attached to her public identity, signaling a tension that has yet to be resolved. This tug-of-war isn't just between people. It's between values. On one side stands the weight of tradition, protocol, and hierarchy. A monarchy that sees titles as sacred, inherited, and representative of duty. On the other side is a modern, media-savvy couple who see titles as part of their personal narrative, tools to be used, not burdens to be endured. That is the heart of the conflict. And that is why the title debate has become so emotionally charged. It's not just a matter of what's fair. It's about what the monarchy stands for in the 21st century. Is it an institution rooted in heritage and rules? Or can it evolve into something more flexible, more adaptable, more in tune with the global stage? For now, the titles remain. But as this background reveals, they do so under constant strain. And as King Charles grows older, the inevitability of William's ascension casts a long shadow. Because when that day comes, and the crown is placed on William's head, the title tug-of-war will end, one way or another. When King Charles ascended the throne following the death of Queen Elizabeth II, he inherited more than a crown. He stepped into a role shaped by centuries of expectation and tradition, but also into a volatile modern era where every royal breath is analyzed, every silence scrutinized, and every decision laced with potential consequence. Among the most delicate matters placed before him was the dilemma of his younger son, Prince Harry, and daughter-in-law Meghan Markle, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. By the time Charles was officially crowned, Harry and Meghan had already spent several years carving out a life in California, far removed from the rituals of Buckingham Palace. They had launched media empires, inked multi-million-dollar contracts, and publicly criticized the institution Charles now leads. And yet, through it all, their royal titles remained untouched. The world waited to see if the new monarch would act. Would he strip them of their titles in a firm gesture of accountability? Or would he try to preserve what remained of the fragile family ties that had withstood the strain of betrayal, public shaming, and emotional distance? As the weeks turned into months, it became increasingly clear that Charles would choose neither path outright. Instead, he opted for something far more deliberate. He chose silence. And not the silence of avoidance or denial, but of calculation. To understand King Charles's inaction, one must first understand the man himself. Unlike his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, whose stoicism defined her reign, Charles has long been seen as more introspective and sensitive to public opinion. He is a monarch of a different generation, deeply aware of the importance of perception, reputation, and strategic restraint. He has also lived much of his life under the microscope. His marriage to Princess Diana, its collapse, the scandalous phone calls, and the eventual emergence of Camilla as queen consort have all shaped how he moves through the world. He knows the power of headlines. He knows the cost of missteps. So when it came to the matter of Harry and Meghan's titles, Charles did not act out of emotion. He acted, or rather, chose not to act, out of caution. According to sources close to the palace, Charles feared that removing Harry and Meghan's titles would trigger a public relations crisis. It would feed the narrative that the monarchy is vindictive, unforgiving, and unwilling to embrace modernity. It would also confirm Harry's worst accusations that the institution prioritizes image over family, control over compassion. More importantly, Charles understood that any punitive action against his son and daughter-in-law would cast a shadow over his own reign. He was not simply a father seeking resolution. He was a monarch managing a kingdom that had only just begun to accept him as sovereign. The timing mattered, too. When Queen Elizabeth passed away, Britain was still grappling with political instability, economic downturn, and social unrest. The last thing Charles needed was to ignite a royal firestorm that would distract from the work of consolidating his leadership. He needed the public to see him as steady, wise, and above personal vendettas. Behind closed doors, insiders say the monarch wrestled with the dilemma. On one side stood the expectations of tradition, the idea that stepping away from royal duties should mean relinquishing the titles that come with them. On the other side stood the realities of a divided public, some sympathetic to Harry and Meghan, others eager for their removal. But Charles's concern wasn't limited to public reaction. His decision also reflected a deeper understanding of power and timing. He knew that his reign would be transitional. At 76, he does not have the luxury of a decades-long rule. He sees himself as a bridge between the past and the future. And he knows the future belongs to William. That's where the strategy becomes clear. By allowing Harry and Meghan to keep their titles during his reign, Charles preserves a delicate balance. He avoids immediate confrontation, keeps the family schism from deepening, and leaves the long-term consequences to his son, whose reign will redefine the monarchy for a new era. According to palace insiders, Charles has already given Prince William quiet approval to make changes once he becomes king. That includes the authority to remove titles if necessary. The message is subtle but unmistakable. Charles will not be the monarch who punishes his son, but he will not prevent his successor from doing what he believes is right. This delegation of responsibility allows Charles to maintain his image as a thoughtful, restrained ruler while simultaneously laying the groundwork for future reform. It also gives William the opportunity to define his kingship through action. The younger prince is known for his firm sense of duty, his commitment to the monarchy, and his intolerance for ambiguity. He is expected to make swift decisions that reflect a modern, forward-looking vision of royal life. Still, the silence of King Charles has not gone unnoticed. Critics argue that his inaction sends the wrong message, that by allowing Harry and Meghan to continue using their titles, he is enabling them to profit from a system they claim to oppose. Some within the royal circle are said to be furious. Courtiers, aristocrats, and senior aides have expressed concern that the monarchy's reputation is being undermined by association. But Charles remains unmoved. He is not interested in escalating the feud. Nor is he eager to be remembered as a king who allowed a family dispute to overshadow his reign. His priorities lie elsewhere, modernizing the monarchy, building diplomatic relationships, and preserving public confidence. There's also the emotional dimension. Despite everything, Charles remains a father. The loss of his relationship with Harry weighs on him. Friends of the king say he continues to hope for reconciliation, however distant that hope may seem. He understands that once titles are stripped, the breach may become permanent. That's a risk he appears unwilling to take, especially with limited time to repair what has been lost. Moreover, Charles is acutely aware of the scrutiny he faces as a monarch whose own life was marked by personal scandal. He knows how quickly public opinion can turn. He knows the cost of appearing too harsh, too brittle, too authoritarian. By choosing silence, he buys time, not just for himself, but for the institution. But silence is never truly silent. Each day the titles remain, the debate grows louder. Each headline, each podcast, each royal appearance by Harry and Meghan under the Sussex banner fuels another round of public and political outcry. And every time Charles declines to act, it's interpreted as endorsement, or at least indifference. The truth is more complicated. Charles's silence is not passive. It is tactical. It is a bet that the future can clean up what the present cannot. It is a father's attempt to navigate a minefield without triggering another explosion. It is the silence of a man who has spent a lifetime waiting for power and now wields it with measured precision. And yet, the cost of that silence may grow over time. As Prince William's coronation looms in the not-so-distant future, the pressure will only intensify. The public will demand clarity. Parliament may be called upon. The monarchy itself may face another reckoning. Until then, the titles remain. The silence holds. And King Charles, sovereign of the realm, continues to play the long game, one careful step at a time. Prince William has always walked a narrow path. Born into a world of wealth, scrutiny, and expectation, he was groomed from the very beginning to inherit a crown that carries centuries of history. Unlike his younger brother, William never had the luxury of escape. He never dabbled in rebellion, never questioned the foundation of the monarchy, at least not in public. Instead, he accepted the weight of legacy. He studied, trained, married, and prepared. Now, as the Prince of Wales, he stands on the precipice of history, waiting for his moment to lead. And when that moment comes, there is little doubt that his leadership will mark a sharp departure from his father's cautious restraint. If reports from within the palace are to be believed, one of William's first decisive acts as king will be to address the issue that his father has long avoided, the titles of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. And he will not hesitate. Those who know William describe him as measured but firm. Behind the well-tailored suits and carefully curated public appearances is a man who holds deeply traditional views about the monarchy. He believes in order, in duty, in the invisible structure that has allowed the royal family to endure through war, scandal, and revolution. And he does not take lightly the idea that any one family or not should exploit that structure for personal gain. The rift between William and Harry is no longer just a matter of sibling rivalry. It is now a matter of institutional divergence. Harry, having walked away from royal duties, has repeatedly criticized the very framework that William has spent his life upholding. Every interview, every book release, every public critique of the royal family has widened the gulf. What might have once been mended over time has now calcified into something deeper, something colder. Within palace corridors, senior aides speak of William's growing frustration, not just with Harry and Meghan's actions, but with the perception that the monarchy has done nothing to hold them accountable. To William, the titles still attached to the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are a contradiction. They suggest legitimacy. They imply royal endorsement. And that, in his view, is unacceptable. In contrast to his father's hesitance, William is believed to favor clarity over ambiguity. He does not want to continue the dance of half-measures and silent disapproval. When he becomes king, sources say, he intends to bring resolution, one that removes the question mark hanging over the Sussex titles. But this isn't about revenge. Those close to William insist his motives are not personal. He's not seeking to punish Harry for leaving. Rather, he sees the removal of the titles as a necessary step to protect the monarchy from dilution. In his mind, allowing Harry and Meghan to continue using their titles while living in the United States, signing lucrative deals, and speaking freely on controversial topics erodes the very essence of what the royal family represents. The monarchy, in William's eyes, is not a brand. It's not a media asset or a tool for personal ambition. It's a duty, a covenant with the people. And that covenant requires sacrifice, loyalty, and sometimes painful choices. William is no stranger to sacrifice himself. From a young age, he was burdened with the trauma of losing his mother under tragic and very public circumstances. He has spent decades watching his family's every move dissected by the media. He has endured scandals not of his making and carried the public's expectations through it all. When he married Catherine Middleton, he did so knowing she, too, would bear the scrutiny. And when their children were born, he became even more committed to shaping a future monarchy that would be disciplined, controlled, and untainted by controversy. That vision does not include a pair of royals who operate outside the system but continue to use its benefits. Privately, William has reportedly already begun laying the groundwork. Conversations with advisors, constitutional experts, and even members of parliament have taken place behind closed doors. While nothing has been publicly confirmed, those familiar with the discussions say a rough blueprint is in place. A plan that would, upon his ascension, seek to formally revoke the Sussex titles through the appropriate legal and constitutional channels. Such a move would be unprecedented in the modern era. But William is not expected to shy away from it. He views it as necessary. Inevitable, even. What's more, sources say the plan has quiet backing within the royal family. While Charles has chosen to remain publicly neutral, others, including Queen Camilla and the Princess of Wales, are said to support William's desire to resolve the issue once and for all. The general consensus is that continued association with Harry and Meghan, under the guise of royalty, only invites further damage. There is also growing pressure from the British public and political circles. Members of Parliament have voiced concerns over the Sussexes' use of their titles in public-facing commercial activities. Some have even floated the idea of independent legislative action if the palace fails to act. William, attuned to the pulse of national sentiment, knows that inaction may no longer be an option by the time he wears the crown. But William's approach is also rooted in a larger vision for the monarchy itself. He sees himself as the modernizer who will strip away the excess, tighten the structure, and reposition the monarchy as a focused and disciplined institution. That vision includes fewer working royals, streamlined operations, and a more professional approach to public service. In that vision, titles are not ornamental, they are functional. They are reserved for those who serve the crown, not those who monetize its image from afar. By removing Harry and Meghan's titles, William would be sending a clear message, not just to them, but to future generations of royals. A message that says titles are earned and upheld through service, not inherited for convenience. That clarity is something William values above all else. He watched as his grandmother navigated decades of change with quiet consistency. He observed his father's long wait for the throne, marked by both anticipation and public criticism. And he has learned from both. He intends to lead with focus, purpose, and resolution. The fallout from such a decision, of course, would be considerable. Harry and Meghan's global profile ensures that any move to revoke their titles would dominate headlines for weeks. Their supporters would decry the decision as punitive, vindictive, and petty. It would likely reignite public interest in the rift between the brothers and could lead to new media appearances, interviews, or written rebuttals. But William is prepared for that. He knows the consequences. He has weighed them. And still, he is said to believe that the long-term integrity of the monarchy is worth the short-term chaos. The question is no longer whether William will act. It is when. He is not yet king, but he is the future. And that future is approaching faster than many realize. As King Charles continues his reign with measured caution, William stands in the wings with quiet resolve. A prince poised to lead. A man determined to define a new era. And a future king who, unlike his father, is ready to act with finality. Behind the grandeur of Buckingham Palace and the polished performances of royal engagements, a very different world exists. It is one of tightly closed doors, coded language, and hushed conversations held in oak-paneled rooms, away from prying eyes and cameras. In that world, strategy is everything. And within its chambers, one particular issue has lingered for longer than most senior aides care to admit: the fate of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's titles. While King Charles publicly maintained a posture of grace and reconciliation, sources have confirmed that secret meetings were convened inside royal residences as early as the second half of 2021. These meetings were not listed on any official schedules. There were no formal press briefings. But the topic was unmistakable: what to do about Harry and Meghan's titles. The meetings reportedly took place in multiple phases, with some held at Clarence House, others at Sandringham, and a few even coordinated via encrypted channels while key members traveled abroad. The gatherings included a mixture of senior palace staff, trusted legal experts, parliamentary liaisons, and, at times, family members whose positions within the royal hierarchy gave them reason to care about the outcome. What emerged was a consensus, albeit a quietly spoken one. There needed to be a plan. At the heart of these meetings was the understanding that the monarchy was facing a new kind of challenge. For centuries, royal titles had been synonymous with allegiance, responsibility, and loyalty to the crown. The concept of holding a royal title while operating as an independent entity outside the royal fold, across an ocean, under no obligation to observe protocol, was unheard of. And for many inside the palace, it was unacceptable. Harry and Meghan had crossed a line. Not necessarily because they left. Others had left before. But because they left, kept their titles, and began speaking out. Their comments about racism within the family, about institutional neglect, and about the emotional toll of life behind palace walls had deeply unsettled the royal establishment. The Oprah interview in particular struck like a bolt of lightning, splitting the firm into two camps. One camp wanted to respond with grace, to protect the institution through silence and dignity. The other wanted accountability, measured, strategic, but unmistakable. According to individuals familiar with the discussions, Queen Elizabeth herself was aware of the early meetings. Though frail in her final years, she was briefed regularly by trusted advisors. She did not give direct orders, nor did she express a wish to have the titles removed while she lived. But she supported the idea of preparing for every possible outcome, including the nuclear option of revocation. Her passing in 2022 created a void, not just in leadership but in moral authority. Without the Queen's unifying presence, debates that had once been tempered by loyalty to her reign began to intensify. King Charles inherited not only the crown but the unresolved problem of the Sussexes' royal designations. The secret meetings resumed, this time under his watch. This next round of sessions was more formal, structured, and directive. The goal was to weigh the legal feasibility of removing the Duke and Duchess titles while also anticipating the backlash such a move might invite. Attendees included top constitutional experts, many of whom had studied the historical precedents and knew just how tricky the path ahead would be. Removing a royal title is not like canceling a Netflix subscription. It is a process deeply rooted in British constitutional law and requires input from Parliament. Most agree that the Titles Deprivation Act of 1917 would be the likeliest framework through which such action could be taken. But that act was crafted during wartime to strip peerages from enemies of the crown, royals who had aligned themselves with Germany. Applying that same act to Harry and Meghan, though legally plausible, would carry tremendous symbolic weight. Some insiders warned against using such an archaic law for modern purposes. Others saw it as precisely the kind of bold move needed to protect the sanctity of the monarchy. Drafts were reportedly drawn up. Contingency strategies were mapped. Even talking points were sketched in case the palace needed to communicate the decision to the public. And then, curiously, everything paused. According to several accounts, King Charles requested a cooling-off period. He wanted to observe how the Sussexes conducted themselves in the months following Queen Elizabeth's death. He believed in giving them one more opportunity to respect the institution from afar. If they refrained from further criticism and avoided exploiting their titles in the media, perhaps the issue could simply fade away. But the couple did not retreat. Harry's memoir, Spare, was released to explosive reaction. Media tours followed. Meghan returned to podcasting, and both continued to leverage their global platforms. Platforms enhanced, as many palace aides noted bitterly, by their continued association with royalty. The silence from Charles that followed was seen by some as weakness, but others interpreted it as patience. What remained clear to those in the inner circle was that the discussions hadn't been buried. They had simply shifted strategy. Rather than acting immediately, the palace began crafting a long-term approach, one that would unfold under the future King William. That is when Prince William's name began to appear more frequently in meeting notes. According to reports, he was briefed on the legal findings, the public sentiment data, and the media landscape. He was given access to the draft documents, including proposed language for an announcement that would strip the Sussexes of their titles while reinforcing the monarchy's commitment to duty and service. His reaction, insiders say, was measured but resolute. He agreed. The meetings then took on a new tone, less theoretical, more actionable. Legal advisors were tasked with updating the parliamentary approach. Media consultants were asked to run simulations of possible headlines and public responses. Public opinion polls were conducted discreetly, and liaisons were sent to consult with MPs who might be amenable to supporting a formal bill if and when the time came. In other words, The plan had moved from discussion to preparation. Some of these meetings were reported to have occurred during high-level strategy weekends at Balmoral and Windsor. A handful of trusted advisors from the Prime Minister's circle were also informed. While no official parliamentary movement has taken place as of yet, the infrastructure is in place. The chessboard is set. All it needs now is the right moment. And that moment, many believe, will arrive with William's coronation. By waiting until Charles's reign comes to a natural close, the palace avoids the appearance of retaliation. William can then frame the decision not as an emotional response to personal grievances, but as a structural adjustment, one meant to redefine royal titles for the modern era. Some insiders have speculated that the move may be timed to coincide with broader changes within the monarchy. There has been ongoing discussion about trimming the number of working royals, reducing public expenditures, and modernizing the institution's image. Removing the Sussex titles could be positioned as part of that larger effort, an overdue correction that aligns titles with responsibility. But what makes these secret meetings so revealing is what they say about the inner workings of the palace itself. While the public sees a monarchy bound by tradition and ceremony, the reality is far more dynamic. The royal family, particularly in this era of relentless scrutiny, functions as a tightly run operation. Decisions are not made in isolation. They are the product of endless calculation, analysis, and rehearsal. The monarchy may appear old-fashioned, but its survival depends on adapting to the ever-changing landscape of public opinion and global media. For now, the meetings remain unconfirmed by official sources. They are whispers, murmurs passed along by insiders, advisors, and palace staff with first-hand knowledge, but no permission to speak openly. And yet, the consistency of these reports, the mounting evidence, and the subtle shifts in royal behavior all point to one conclusion. The palace is not sitting idle. It is preparing. The fate of Harry and Meghan's titles may be undecided in public, but in the gilded rooms of power, decisions have already been made. The timing, the wording, the legal mechanics, they're all mapped out. All that remains is for the right door to open, and for the next monarch to walk through it. The sun rises differently in California. It's warmer, softer, and altogether freer than the gray dawns of London. That freedom was exactly what Prince Harry and Meghan Markle sought when they packed their lives, their young son, and what remained of their ties to the monarchy and moved across the Atlantic. Montecito, a serene, high-end enclave nestled in the hills of Santa Barbara County, became their new home, a world away from the structured corridors of Buckingham Palace. It was more than a move. It was a declaration. In the early months following their royal exit in 2020, Meghan and Harry adjusted to a radically different pace of life. Gone were the daily briefings from palace courtiers, the tightly choreographed public appearances, the scrutiny over dress codes and seating arrangements. In their place came the quiet hum of private life, morning hikes through nearby trails, early breakfasts with their growing children, and the slow but purposeful rebuilding of their identities outside the confines of royalty. Their Montecito estate is expansive and secluded, featuring lush gardens, towering hedges, and a long gated driveway. The home was chosen carefully for its privacy and tranquility. Inside, the decor reflects a blend of Meghan's minimalist Californian aesthetic and Harry's British heritage. High ceilings, neutral tones, cozy reading nooks. It's both a sanctuary and a command center, where their post-royal ambitions quietly unfold. But life in California hasn't been without its complexities. Far from the crown, Meghan and Harry have remained unmistakably royal in the eyes of the public and the media. Despite their departure from official duties, they never shed the titles. They were still the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. And that identity, though diluted in practice, followed them into every room, every meeting, every project. With that identity came opportunity. The Sussex name carried weight. It opened doors, unlocked deals, attracted collaborators. In Hollywood and Silicon Valley, it translated into value, both social and financial. The couple signed headline-making contracts with streaming giants like Netflix and Spotify, launched their Archwell Foundation, and set in motion a slew of public-facing projects aimed at storytelling, healing, and global advocacy. It was the kind of soft power that could only be born from royalty, even when royalty was no longer formally in play. In the United States, the reception was initially warm. Meghan and Harry were seen as brave for walking away. Celebrities and political figures praised their honesty, particularly after the Oprah interview. The couple's willingness to address racism, mental health, and family dysfunction struck a chord in a country where such topics, though uncomfortable, are increasingly part of the public dialogue. But that warmth was never universal. As the months passed and the Sussexes continued to speak, cracks began to show. Their critics accused them of hypocrisy, claiming they wanted privacy while simultaneously courting the media. Others questioned their motives, accusing them of commercializing their trauma. The use of their royal titles and business ventures drew particular ire, especially in the United Kingdom, where the sense of betrayal ran deeper. Still, within their California compound, Meghan and Harry continued to push forward. They redefined their roles as public figures not bound by institution but by personal mission. Archetypes, Meghan's podcast, gave her a platform to discuss the limitations placed on women and to reframe the labels she had been subjected to. Harry, meanwhile, collaborated on mental health series, appeared at charity events, and promoted environmental awareness and veterans issues. Parenthood was a grounding force in their lives. The birth of their daughter, Lilibet Diana, in June 2021 marked a tender moment for the family. Named in honor of both Queen Elizabeth and Princess Diana, Lilibet's arrival was a symbolic bridge between old and new. Despite the tension with the royal family, Harry and Meghan extended an olive branch with the name, a gesture that received mixed reactions. Raising their children away from the glare of royal photographers was one of their central reasons for leaving. In California, Archie and Lilibet would not be expected to curtsy, wave from palace balconies, or have their every step chronicled in the tabloids. They could be kids first, heirs to a quieter legacy. But even in seclusion, the royal shadow stretched long. Whether appearing on panels, giving speeches, or attending galas, Meghan and Harry were rarely introduced without their titles. Their philanthropic work was reported with headlines that invariably included the words Duke and Duchess. And with every utterance of those titles came renewed criticism, particularly from across the pond. In the United Kingdom, a growing chorus of voices asked why they were still allowed to use their titles at all. They had left, hadn't they? They had turned their backs on royal life. So why continue to benefit from the institution they criticized? For the couple, the answer was complicated. The titles were part of who they were, bestowed not by merit alone but by marriage, by bloodline, and by tradition. Removing them, at least in their view, would be like erasing part of their story. And beyond symbolism, the titles provided clarity. In a world crowded with celebrity influencers and public personalities, being introduced as Duke and Duchess of Sussex distinguished them. It was a shorthand that communicated history, stature, and a kind of noble credibility that money alone could never buy. Yet they walked a careful line. In most official communications, they emphasized the name of their foundation, Archewell. On social media, they rarely referred to themselves by title. In interviews, they oscillated between informality and formality, introducing themselves as Harry and Meghan but allowing hosts and moderators to use their full designations. That ambiguity didn't go unnoticed. To their detractors, it was calculated. A way to have it both ways. To be outsiders when it suited them, and insiders when it offered advantage. To criticize the monarchy and still wield its influence. To their supporters, it was more about survival. Titles gave them a fighting chance to stay relevant in an era where public attention is fleeting and influence is everything. They had sacrificed their place within the firm but were not about to surrender every tool they had left. The truth lies somewhere in between. California gave Meghan and Harry space to heal, to parent, and to build something uniquely their own. But it never fully freed them from the monarchy's grip. They remained tethered, not just by titles but by legacy, by expectation, and by a public that refused to let them be anything other than royal. As the couple continued to navigate this complex new chapter, the question of their titles remained unresolved. Rumors from the palace suggested that the time would come when decisions would be made. That King Charles, though unwilling to act now, had paved the way for his son William to address the matter definitively. In the meantime, Meghan and Harry's California life carried on. Their days began with school runs and ended with video calls, planning meetings, and brainstorming sessions. They worked behind the scenes on documentaries, wrote speeches, attended board meetings for their foundation. Their circle of friends included activists, artists, venture capitalists, and fellow exiles of various kinds. And though they lived thousands of miles from Windsor, the walls around them often echoed with questions from a past they couldn't shake. Would the titles last? Would the family feud ever mend? Would their children grow up burdened by a legacy they didn't ask for? California had given them many answers, but not those. That reckoning, they knew, was coming. And it would not arrive with a sunrise over the Pacific, but with the sound of a crown being passed from one monarch to the next. No royal decision exists in a vacuum, and certainly not in the 21st century. In the age of social media, rolling news cycles, and instant public commentary, every move the royal family makes is met with a whirlwind of reactions. And when it comes to Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, few topics ignite more passionate, polarized, and persistent debate than the question of their royal titles. The public divide on whether the Duke and Duchess of Sussex should retain their titles can be viewed through two vastly different lenses, one British, steeped in tradition and royal protocol, the other American, shaped by ideals of reinvention, independence, and celebrity culture. These divergent viewpoints have added fuel to the fire and ensured that the conversation remains front and center in the global media landscape. In the United Kingdom, the mood around Harry and Meghan has changed drastically since their departure in 2020. In the early days, there was a level of sympathy. British citizens had watched the couple struggle under the weight of intense tabloid scrutiny. Many agreed that Meghan had been unfairly targeted by sections of the press. Their decision to step back was met by some with understanding, even admiration, for doing what they believed was best for their family. But that sympathy eroded quickly. As the interviews began, first with Oprah, then with The Cut, then Harry's memoir, the mood hardened. What had once been perceived as an unfortunate family split began to feel, to many Britons, like a public assault on the monarchy. For a nation that takes its royal family seriously, this was no small matter. Criticism of the firm wasn't just a family matter. It was, in the eyes of many, criticism of the country itself. Public polls in the UK began to reflect this shift. In 2021, surveys conducted by respected outlets like YouGov and Ipsos Mori showed that favorability ratings for both Harry and Meghan had dropped significantly. Once among the most popular royals, Harry found himself slipping further down the public approval rankings. Meghan's numbers were even lower, with many respondents expressing anger over what they saw as her turning her back on the Queen and the institution she had joined. The tipping point for many came with the consistent use of the Sussex titles in high-profile American projects. British observers watched with unease as Harry and Meghan were introduced as Duke and Duchess during speaking engagements, award ceremonies, and television appearances. To them, it seemed disingenuous. If they had truly stepped away from royal life, why continue to use the titles that came with it? Tabloid columnists and royal correspondents seized on this tension. Opinion pieces accused the couple of exploiting their titles for financial gain. Former palace insiders were quoted lamenting the breach of protocol. Even MPs began to speak out. One member of parliament called for a parliamentary review, questioning whether individuals living abroad and no longer serving the crown should retain their peerages. For many in Britain, the use of the Sussex titles was not simply a matter of branding. It was a question of respect. Respect for the Queen who had granted the titles. Respect for the institution of monarchy. And, perhaps most of all, respect for the British public, many of whom saw the royal family as an extension of their national identity. This sentiment was echoed on radio call-in shows, in comment sections, and around dinner tables. Whether conservative or liberal, working class or upper class, there was a growing agreement that the current situation was unsustainable. People wanted clarity. They wanted a decision. They wanted the titles either affirmed through a renewed commitment to the monarchy or revoked entirely. Across the Atlantic, however, the picture was starkly different. In the United States, the fascination with Harry and Meghan has never been rooted in protocol. Americans, after all, have no monarchy of their own. Their understanding of royalty comes primarily through history books, films, and media portrayals. And to them, the Sussexes were never just royals, they were protagonists in a modern saga of personal liberation. The Oprah interview, while divisive in the UK, was received in the US as a watershed moment. Meghan's candid revelations about her mental health struggles and feelings of isolation struck a deep chord. Harry's comments about generational trauma and his efforts to protect his wife from the fate that befell his mother, Princess Diana, were seen as courageous. The couple were painted not as defectors, but as survivors. American celebrities, activists, and influencers rallied around them. Social media exploded with messages of support. Major magazines featured glowing cover stories. They were invited to speak at prestigious events, awarded for their humanitarian efforts, and praised for using their platforms to advocate for mental health, racial justice, and gender equality. In this environment, the use of royal titles wasn't viewed with the same suspicion. To many Americans, Duke and Duchess were simply part of their names, an exotic quirk that added to their uniqueness. Far from being seen as an abuse of privilege, their titles became part of their brand, like a Hollywood star's stage name or a tech founder's startup persona. It wasn't the title that mattered, it was what they did with it. American commentators were more likely to focus on the couple's charitable work, their production deals, their parenting philosophy. When the topic of title removal surfaced, it was often framed as a petty grudge held by a distant, outdated institution. The idea that Parliament might step in to strip them of their titles was perceived by many as overreach, even absurd. But even in America, the public narrative hasn't been entirely rosy. Over time, some voices of skepticism began to emerge. Journalists and cultural critics began to question the couple's strategy. Why were so many of their public appearances centered on recounting royal trauma? Why did they continue to invoke their royal past while claiming to have moved beyond it? Why did they seem unable to establish an identity independent of the monarchy they had left behind? These questions gained traction, especially as content deals began to falter. The Spotify contract, for instance, came to an end after just one season of Meghan's podcast. Reports surfaced of projects being shelved or delayed. Critics began to wonder whether the couple's long-term appeal would endure without their royal titles as a hook. Still, the American response remains largely more forgiving than the British one. Part of that difference lies in culture. In the United States, reinvention is seen as a virtue. The idea of leaving behind an old life to pursue one's truth is not just accepted, it's celebrated. And Meghan, an American herself, embodies that ethos. Her story, from Hollywood actress to royal duchess to independent advocate, reads like the script of a modern heroine. For Harry, too, the American landscape has provided a kind of safety net. In the UK, his every word is dissected for signs of disloyalty. In the US, he's more likely to be seen as a man who gave up privilege for love and authenticity. The narrative is different, and so are the expectations. But the divide between British and American public opinion creates a challenge for the monarchy. How does a centuries-old institution maintain its principles when one half of the world sees those principles as irrelevant? How does it protect its image when former members continue to operate as quasi-royals abroad? And how does it navigate global media, which is now so interconnected that a decision made in Westminster has consequences in Los Angeles? These are the questions the palace must grapple with. For Meghan and Harry, the difference in perception has been both a blessing and a burden. In America, they've found support, business opportunities, and a cultural narrative that favors their independence. But in Britain, they remain figures of contention. And as long as they retain their titles, they will continue to be judged by the standards of a monarchy they no longer serve. In the end, public opinion will play a crucial role in shaping the future of those titles. Politicians respond to pressure. Monarchs, even in constitutional systems, are not immune to public sentiment. If enough of the British public demands action, it will become harder for the palace to maintain the status quo. Conversely, if Meghan and Harry choose to voluntarily relinquish their titles, they may win back a measure of respect from their critics. But such a decision would come at a cost, symbolic, emotional, and potentially financial. For now, the divide remains. In Britain, calls for clarity grow louder. In America, admiration still lingers. And somewhere in the middle, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle continue to live their lives, half in the present, half in the past, while the world watches, waits, and weighs in. It began like any other breezy afternoon in the affluent Montecito neighborhood: sunshine, silence, and the occasional hum of a Bentley rolling up a private drive. The boutiques along Coast Village Road were bathed in that golden California light, their polished windows gleaming like jewels set into white stucco. Inside one of the town's most exclusive luxury shops, a place where celebrity sightings are so routine that no one even bats an eye, something completely unexpected happened. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, stormed out of the boutique in a fury that shattered the town's famously calm demeanor. Witnesses described the moment as surreal, the kind of scene you expect on a reality TV show, not outside a store that sells five-figure handbags and custom silk ropes. Meghan, in a crisp cream ensemble with oversized shades shielding her eyes, had entered the shop with the casual confidence of someone used to red carpets and royal protocols. But within minutes, that confidence curdled into rage. She shouted, "You can't treat me like this," one bystander whispered. Another recalled seeing Meghan waving her hands, her voice rising in disbelief and indignation. Shop attendants looked stunned. Other shoppers paused mid-purchase. But what caused the uproar? Why would someone as image-conscious and media-savvy as Meghan Markle lose her cool in public? The story quickly unraveled, and it wasn't pretty. Sources inside the boutique, which has since asked not to be named due to the controversy, revealed that Meghan was attempting to purchase several high-end items from a private collection. Pieces not available to the general public and certainly not to anyone without a verified account with the store. The collection, we learned, is reserved for ultra-VIP clients, individuals with long-standing relationships, custom-tailored histories, and the sort of financial records that make even billionaires blush. Meghan, despite her fame, was not on that list. She assumed her name would open every door, an employee later confided, but our luxury brand policy doesn't bend for anyone, even royalty, especially not royalty that has technically stepped back from their official duties. The problem wasn't just that Meghan wasn't on the VIP list, it was the refusal of the staff to bend the rules. When they politely told her that the pieces she was eyeing weren't available for public sale, Meghan allegedly pressed harder. She referenced her status, her public influence, her global platform. Still, the staff didn't budge. It was then, according to reports, that Meghan's tone shifted. One staff member, who asked to remain anonymous, said Meghan accused the boutique of discrimination, of disrespect, and of being tone-deaf to her significance in the modern world. The claim left everyone in the room frozen. It was awkward, another shopper recalled. No one knew whether to leave or keep browsing. You could tell the staff were trying really hard to stay professional. After being repeatedly denied access to the private collection and failing to persuade the manager to make an exception, Meghan left the shop in what many described as a visible huff, her car door slamming behind her. Within minutes, the incident had trickled onto social media. And in a town like Montecito, where celebrity drama is usually confined to tabloid headlines, the real-time reports hit like a tidal wave. Almost instantly, Twitter threads and Reddit posts exploded with speculation. Was Meghan being unfairly targeted? Or was she demanding entitlement she no longer held? Photos snapped by someone across the street captured Meghan's tense expression and circulated rapidly. The headlines followed suit, each more sensational than the last. The boutique issued a brief statement the following day, trying to play damage control. They emphasized their strict adherence to policies and their commitment to fairness. But the damage was already done. The question on everyone's mind had shifted from what Meghan tried to buy to why she had reacted the way she did. Some say this incident is just the latest in a pattern of clashes between Meghan and institutions she feels don't acknowledge her power. Others suggest it's a symptom of a deeper crisis, a growing disconnect between how Meghan sees herself and how the world, especially post-Megxit, sees her now. Insiders close to the Duchess have tried to spin the event. They claim Meghan felt singled out and unjustly humiliated. One friend even said that Meghan was treated like a nobody, a phrase that has become a flashpoint in discussions about fame, entitlement, and identity in the post-royal age. But as the dust settles, one thing is clear, Montecito hasn't seen this kind of drama since Prince Harry's security team scuffled with paparazzi outside a local coffee shop. This incident, though far more subtle in its consequences, may have deeper implications. It's not just about a shopping trip gone wrong. It's about what happens when perception, privilege, and prestige collide in the harsh light of public scrutiny. The luxury shop, once just a quiet haven for the ultra-elite, has now become an accidental stage for a very public unraveling. And Meghan Markle, once celebrated for her poise and grace, finds herself at the center of a narrative she can't quite control. Is this just a misunderstanding blown out of proportion? Or does it reveal cracks in the carefully crafted image the Duchess has tried so hard to maintain? More importantly, will Montecito and the public at large continue to see Meghan as a misunderstood icon fighting against elitist structures? Or simply as someone who forgot that true royalty lies in humility, not high fashion? Stay tuned. The next chapter might be even louder.